Greetings, minions, I am your humble narrator, SideWaysThinker, and I'm here with another episode of that there Enigmatic Entity, a series in which I discuss some of the more uncanny video game characters. This week we'll be discussing one of the, if not the, most recognisable faces from my favourite game of all time, Christoph from Vampire the Masquerade Fucking no! Can't stand that fucking thing, no! Instead, we're going to be talking about a character that I'm actually quite fond of. Smiling Jack from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines.
I hate LA, but what are you gonna do?
Know any games we can play?
Yes, this week we'll be talking about Smiling Jack from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. For the unaware, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is a PC RPG published in 2004 by Activision and developed by Troika Games. The game takes place in the old World of Darkness setting, specifically in and around LA. The game sees you, a newborn vampire, colloquially referred to as a fledgling, born into the seedy nighttime underworld of this vampiric city of angels. Shortly after being embraced, for the uninitiated, vampires refer to turning another person into a vampire as being embraced. Also, the terms kindred and canite are used to broadly describe all vampires, but despite this, the vampires themselves branch off into many different groups called clans that function as different ethnic groups among vampires. The exact nature and detail of clans vary wildly from one another, and we won't discuss those differences in this video. As an addendum to this series of definitions and terminology, kindred refer to humans as kine. The player character finds their sire being the kindred term for the vampire that turned them into a vampire, executed for creating them against the laws of the Camarilla, the Camarilla being the closest thing the vampires have to a unified government. But the life of the player character is spared by the Prince of LA, Prince being the term used for the leader of the local branch of the Camarilla, after he is coerced by the local vampire population. The player character is given an impossible task meant to be a roundabout death sentence. They complete this task and then they spend the rest of this game coming to grips with the maddening world of supernatural phenomena and politicking. Of all the most prominent picky politicers, there are none more picky nor politicky than Sebastian Lacroix. Sebastian, one-time member of the army of Napoleon Bonaparte, is the prickly, prissy, princely ponce who had your sire executed at the beginning of the game. This particular prince was a relatively recent addition to the LA Camarilla and is indeed quite an unwelcome one. Throughout the game, Lacroix is shown to be deeply self-absorbed and potently concerned with his own position in the Camarilla. This concern is, however, warranted, as few of the kindred in LA recognize his authority, be they Camarilla or not. The leader of the local Tremere, Maximilian Strauss, believes the new prince to be a fool, though he won't say so openly. The leader of the Nosferatu, Gary, actively acts against the prince and is unconcerned and even mocking of the situation when the player shows up on the prince's orders. Finally, the local anarch population sees him as little more than a joke, and a badly told one at that. The most vocal opponent of the new prince, and indeed the Camarilla as a whole, is none other than Nines Rodriguez, a Depression-era Bruja who serves as the unofficial spokesperson and leader of the LA branch of the Anarch movement, a group of vampires technically part of the Camarilla but who oppose the rigidly enforced laws and rules that the Camarilla represents. Indeed, Nines Rodriguez, it would appear, is the only reason that the player character survived their first night as one of the kindred. LaCroix, in the beginning of the game, appears entirely willing to, and indeed intending, to execute the player, along with their sire. This is stopped mere moments before the order comes down by Rodriguez getting to his feet and declaring the situation to be bullshit. This declaration causes an uproar amongst all of the vampires present to witness the execution, in essence, forcing LaCroix's hand and saving the player's life. Second among the prince's enemies, though this is largely due to his aloof nature and apparent uninvolvement in the world, is the aforementioned Maximilian Strauss, leader of the LA Tremere Chantry. Maximilian is a staunch supporter of the Camarilla and indeed next in line for the position of prince after LaCroix. Despite his loyalty to the Camarilla, or possibly due to said loyalty, Maximilian Strauss quietly works to undermine the authority of LaCroix, believing him to be a greedy, self-serving incompetent and a danger to the stability of Camarilla rule in LA. He speaks to the player primarily in riddles for most of the game, making his wishes known in such a way as to not implicate himself in anything, with a rare exception or two in which he has an overtly vested interest. But I'm getting off of topic here. This video isn't about the intricacies of the LA kindred scene, it's about one particular member of that scene, Smiling Jack. Smiling Jack is a member of the LA Anarch movement. Indeed, it seems as if he is the oldest of the LA Anarchs we meet in the game, being older even than the Baron of Hollywood and arguable actual leader of the LA Anarchs, Isaac Abrams. Jack's clan is known in the game. He is a Bruja, along with almost all of the Anarchs we meet, with the exception of Isaac Abrams himself, who is a Toreador, but then Isaac is from Hollywood. Jack is held with a kind of hero worship style reverence in the eyes of the LA Anarch movement, seen as a great example as to what the Anarch movement can and should be. Though he doesn't speak much about his own past in the game, by the way the other characters talk about Jack, it can be assumed that he is fairly old, older than the rest of the Anarchs at the very least, and that he appears to not lust after power, having been offered leadership roles within the Anarchs several times, and having refused each offer in turn. He appears to simply be a kindly face and an unfriendly knight, and while he is pulled by his own bias against the Camarilla and the Ventrue clan in particular, he doesn't take much of a role in the politics of the night, even seeming to be unwilling to directly involve himself in Anarch plans in recent nights. From beginning to end of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, Jack acts as a mentor and as a friend to the player character, guiding him and advising him, but never seeming to try to force him down one path or another. As such, Jack is remembered as one of the nicer and more likeable characters in an already brilliant cast of colourful and charismatic misfits. The true nature of Jack is, however, a lot more grim than one might expect. The LA setting does exist officially within the old world of darkness, described in the Vampire the Masquerade book LA by Night. Of all the characters described in the book as being elements of LA's nightlife, the only one of them to make it into VTMB is Jack. Indeed, most, if not all, of the other characters present within VTMB were invented for VTMB, with the exception of Beckett, but Beckett is a visitor into LA and not a member of its kindred scene. In the book, the description of Jack is very different from the jolly Bruja hobo/biker we meet in the game. He's described as loud, brash, and very concerned with his own entertainment. All of these are, yes, things we would ascribe to the Jack in the game. He is also, however, deeply disliked and distrusted by many of LA's kindred due to him being insatiably bloodthirsty and violent, to the point at which many of the older LA Anarchs worry that his actions will bring the full strength of the Camarilla down upon them. In his past, it is implied that he was a Caribbean pirate prior to his death, and it would seem that he spreads this rumour that he was a pirate captain. The truth is that, much as in death, he was a bloodthirsty and violent sort in life, and this caused him to never rise above the rank of second mate. His loyalty and usefulness to the crew was appreciated, but his violence meant that he could not be trusted with authority. He is renowned for consistently acting in underhanded ways to destabilise the LA region, not just the Camarilla, but any group that he can. He takes the notion of being an anarch or anarchist very literally, making it his mission to cause chaos wherever he can. Indeed, I have been informed that in some part of the greater lore, Jack died attempting to cause one of his greatest destabilizations. The kindred, to a degree, believe in an approaching apocalypse called Gehenna. There are many omens that the kindred view and worry about relating to this apocalypse, but the most obvious of them is the arrival of the thin-blooded vampires. The Thin Bloods are vampires in whose blood the curse of Cain is so diluted that they are weaker than almost all other vampires, and essentially don't belong to any given clan or bloodline. In the setting of the books, we are approaching the final nights, and the Thin Blood population is increasing. Jack lets himself be killed by the Nosferatu Oculos to ensure that a Thin Blood movement he had helped begin would continue on in its activities and, knowingly or otherwise, cause Gehenna to befall the world. He died literally attempting to usher in the end of days, as the vampires understand it. His penchant for causing chaos for its own sake is heavily hinted at even in VTMB. The entire plot revolves around the arrival of the Ankaran sarcophagus and the mystery that surrounds it. In the end of the game, it is heavily implied that there was no mystery to be concerned with within the sarcophagus, just an ancient mummified corpse. Jack, it would appear, purposefully made false signs and evidence pointing towards a great power having lurked within and broken out of said sarcophagus, purely to cause the massive multi-faction war that ensued, taking down much of the Camarilla, Sabat, Kuei Jin, and even Anarch population in the ensuing chaos, for no better reason than to cause the chaos and to entertain himself. In summary, while Jack is a damned lovable character, he is also a violent and subtle one. He manipulates events throughout much of the game purely to cause the most chaos that he can, for seemingly no reason other than his own bizarre fixation on anarchy for its own sake. Despite this, we'll all still love that crazy bastard. Well, that's all we have time for now. I hope you enjoyed this video on Smiling Jack. I was honestly torn about who to talk about in this video. I love so many of the characters from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. For any of you who want to know, my favourite character is the Nosferatu Primogen, gorgeous Gary Golden. But sadly, there's very little to talk about him in terms of lore because, well, he doesn't exist outside of VTMB so far as I can tell. I kind of had to talk about Jack because there just wasn't anyone else with the exception of Beckett, and I find Beckett somewhat dull. I really need to get a game of Vampire the Masquerade tabletop going in which the players are dealing with LA after the events of Bloodlines. It sounds like such a cool setting with such cool characters. Anyway, that's going to have to be all from me for now. I've been your humble narrator, SideWaysThinker, and as always, keep calm and carry on. Good day. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching that video as much as I enjoyed making it. Well, I say that, I could have been having a really shitty day when I recorded that. You can't tell, and I certainly can't. Pre-recorded message and all that. Anyway, just here to say that I have a Twitter account that you can follow if you want occasional updates of random thoughts from me, and that if you're feeling generous, feel free to donate to my Patreon campaign. Every penny donated there makes life easier for me generally and slowly goes towards me getting a better gaming PC. Well, that's that. It's over. Leave. Now. Now!
Do not seek the SideWaysThinker. Do not seek the Pardoner.